Hi, my name is Tai, also known as Bishop Tai, formerly of Abasat Ministry. I've been compelled to make this video because lately my name has been in the news concerning some not so pleasant issues concerning the whereabouts of Ejiro. And so I've spoken with my legal team and they've advised I come out to speak and say my side of the story. So please indulge me. I would begin from when I first came in contact with Abasat Ministry. I once served there, and that was in 2021 after COVID. I was told the ministry began in 2020 when COVID happened, but I joined in 2021, precisely in the month of April. And it was just a regular Wednesday service, 9 p.m. was 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. every Wednesday. A friend invited me. In fact, this friend who invited me was a co-founder. She founded that ministry with Joy Solomon. Her name is Amarachi. When all this got out, she actually reached out to me. I hope you're fine. So she reached out. She invited me to join the prayer meeting, and so I joined the first time, and it was just purely prayers. I liked the sense of fellowship, and I said, okay, I would join us forthgoing. And so weekly I joined the service, and that happened up until the time she left the ministry. That's the person who invited me, Amarachi. And I was still attending fellowships just as a regular member until sometime in June, July. I was reached out to, just I think it was the same person that reached out to me and told me they would like me to be on the workforce of the ministry, to work as an admin and help them handle some prayer sessions, which I was open to. So I told them no problem. And so I joined the workforce team and ministered when required, prayed with people, led prayer sessions during the Wednesday services. And that was it until sometime in August, I think August, September 2020, same 2021, when Joy Solomon reached out to me. She called me and she was like, she needed to see me on a particular Sunday, and that I could come and meet her somewhere and in a demo. So I said, okay, no problem. I was supposed to have a church program somewhere in administration, but I said I would go see her. So I went on this particular day, and I don't even know what to expect. I didn't know the purpose of the call or the purpose of why I was invited to visit. I met some members of the ministry. Not all of them are actually, or we're there at the end of the ministry, but we had a little meeting, and she did mention at that point in time that she was instructed by the Holy Spirit to hand over the baton of the ministry to me because she was supposed to travel out of the country. Okay, and at first that felt overwhelming, and I didn't even know what to make of that. But eventually I accepted to do that. So she said she was going to step aside and she would no longer be in the picture. She would travel and may not have time to focus on the ministry. And so she needed someone to do all that for the ministry. So I said, okay. And that's how I came to become a leader in Abasat Ministry. And we still continue to our Wednesday fellowship. Every Wednesday we met. We prayed for people. We prayed for the nation. We prayed for the church. We just prayed as we were led at that point in time. And this was all there was to it. Purely all there was to it. Just Wednesday services and all that. So fast forward to 2022, and this is where it gets personal for me. Fast forward to 2022, sometime in July or so, we had a retreat at Ife, a prayer retreat. We went to Mount Carmel and we prayed. And then around that period, I was told that I would need to stop working and go into full-time ministry. Now this was not news to me at that point in time, because right from birth, my mom told me that I had a calling and I was going to be a minister, even though I tried to run from it at a particular point. But at some other point, I just accepted and knew I was going to ministry. So when she told me that you need to leave your job and focus on ministry, I spoke with my wife. In fact, I told my wife before we got married that I would likely stop working at a particular point in time and going to full-time ministry. This was way back in 2016, 2014, 2015 when we were dating. I told her then that if something she's willing to go into with me, because the time will come when I will leave my 9 to 5 and face ministry. So when this came up and she told, and Joyce Solomon mentioned, Fumi also mentioned then that I'll be leaving my paid employment and coming to full-time ministry. I prayed about it and I felt peace about it as well. So I resigned from employment and focused on ministry full-time. That took effect from October 2022. Now, without 9 to 5, it was pretty difficult. You had to manage family and everything, the children's school, feeding, utilities, and all that. There are other obligations to family members that had to go and friends around. But somehow we were still able to manage and pull through. And there are times that nothing was even available at home, and she would reach out and say, "Oh, please, I sent something to you, manage." And that was what it was. At that point in time, she was also facing some challenges, and we tried to encourage each other. And this was just purely what it was. Meanwhile, at this point in time, when I was facing all these difficulties, services were still ongoing, still Wednesday services, nothing out of the ordinary. And then sometime in 2023, I will try to cut some parts because I don't want this video to be unnecessarily long. Sometime in 2023, she reached out to me and I was supposed to renew my house rent then. And she mentioned, "Oh, Bishop Tai, I will get a place for you to stay. You don't need to renew your accommodation where you are. And you will need to, when you're moving, you will not be taking any of your belongings. You need to give out everything you have, all your properties." At this point in time, I was occupying a 3-bedroom flat, and even though the house were filled with appliances, with possessions and everything, it took a while to declutter and give out these gifts and these properties to people who needed them, down to everything. In fact, I just bought some gadgets just weeks prior, and I had to give them out, new as it was, because she already said, "Oh, I'm getting your house and to be furnished." So May 2023, I moved out of where I was, and I didn't even know where we were going to, right? But eventually we ended up in an Airbnb apartment that was paid for daily, and we stayed there for a while, not up to 2 months. The rent for that place was quite high. It was paid per day, and at some point I remember telling her, "Ma'am, why don't you think it's wise for us to take this money and just rent a space annually, because the money for a month should cover the rent for a year in a normal place where you just need to furnish and all that." But she was like, "The Lord will provide. There is no need to complain. She's the one footing the bills and all that." And so after almost 2 months we were there, funds dried up for her. She wasn't able to pay up the daily rent for that particular Airbnb, and so we had to move out, and we had to move to a motel. Now, this part that I'm saying now, some people who were members of Abbas Ministry or who were members of Nebayat Academy would be familiar with this particular part of the story I'm about to say. So we moved to a motel in a Kotun, and it was a very dire scenario. I don't want to go into the details of that, but we had to manage for 8-9 months in that particular place and all that. And I wasn't complaining, even in the midst of all that inconvenience, in the midst of all that congestion, we were still holding services. Now, at some particular point in time prior to this, an expression had come out called Nebayat. Now, I was leading the Abbas Ministry, which was what I was told, and she said she was traveling out, but eventually she didn't travel out. So she still oversaw and gave direction about what the ministry should be doing. So it was more of me answering to her as a leader of the ministry at that point in time. But when Ibayat came in, when Ibayat was fully in her care, in fact, when they did the first course, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know. It was when they had successfully finished. She finished the first course. She was now, there's something called Ibayat, a prophetic academy, and she was like, you will join the second cohort. And for me, it was free. She offered the scholarship, so I went. I took the course, and that was that. As at that point, it was still fine for me. So let me come back to the motel story. So we stayed at the motel for over 8 months, and then on sometime February 4th, I can remember the date precisely. It's February 4th of 2024. Jocelyn reached out to me. She called me. It was on a Sunday morning, and she told me she needed to see me by 2 p.m. that afternoon. And I said, okay. I went with my jotter, I went with my journal, because I didn't know when we had meetings, we had to go with things to write. So I just thought it was a normal meeting. When I got there, we talked a bit, and then she mentioned, like, the father was proud of how we selflessly give ourselves to his work, even when nothing was coming in terms of remuneration, even when we had to work in a condition that was not, because sometimes the place can be just a single room motel, myself, my children, my kids, my wife in a single room, and all that ministry service was still ongoing. No one knew what was happening, and she was like, the father is proud of us, and it's time for our reward, and we've done excellently well. And then I'll say this openly. She sent the sum of 10 million naira to my account. She just told me to check my phone. I checked my phone. I've never seen that amount. I've never gotten that amount for myself in my life. And I had so much. I thanked her and all that. And it was just a new lease. And that 10 million naira was to get a house. And the instructions are followed. So she gave me 10 million naira, and then in my bank, she sent to my bank and $1,000 in cash. And that's equivalent of 1 million naira at that point in time, 1 million, 1.4 million, the exchange rate at that time. So the 1 million was to sort out logistics for relocation, flights, and everything. While the 10 million was to get an apartment and furnish it. And this apartment was supposed to be in Abuja, not in Lagos. All this while we were in Lagos, right? So that was the plan. So I'm giving all this backstory to let you know how I met Ejiro, and then we'll continue from there. So that was the plan: get a house in Abuja. I had contacted an agent. He had started looking for properties for me. He had sent videos. He had sent pictures. I told him I was coming. So my meeting with Jocelyn was in February, when she gave the money and said, you are free to go for your house. By March 7th, my flight I took a flight to Abuja. So I began the search for a house. My family was still in Ikotun, in the motel. I just had to go ahead to look for the house and then come back and pick them. So it was in the middle of looking for the house that she called me one evening, and she was like, Bishop Tai, you may not need to actually pay for a house. Something came up, right? And that was where Ejiro came into the picture. Before now, I have not seen Ejiro physically. I did have an interaction with her, but I didn't know she was the one. The interaction I had with her at that point was some time ago. She had reached out to me asking for prayers for her mom, who was supposed to go into surgery, and I did pray with her, and that was all I knew. I didn't know her personally, and I do get all of those requests from time to time. Almost every day I get requests for people to ask me to pray with them or seeking counsel and all that. So that was my only one and only interaction with Ejiro before this particular case, where I actually met her through Jocelyn. Jocelyn said there's one of our members in Abuja who wants to leave a house. She's not interested in renewing the rent. If you like, you can go and see the space. If you like it, you can take up the occupancy of that residence and pay the rent, right? And then she added the sweetener to it, in quotes, that this person is looking to relocate out of the country, and so she may not be needing a property. So she has decided to sow the properties as seed to the ministry, right? And so I may not need to furnish the house